so much. I love you so much. I love you so much. I love you so much.
Hello, all you positive heads out there. Thanks for tuning your beautiful brainwaves into another episode of the Positive Head Podcast, where we are firmly convinced that creating success and happiness is rooted in understanding the ultimate nature of reality and the fact that as human beings, we are all immensely powerful fractals of the one and only source consciousness, which creates and animates all things. Now, of course, understanding this powerful truth is one thing. Applying this incredibly empowering wisdom to everyday life, well, that's another, which is exactly why we provide you with a fresh serving of soul food for thought 5 days a week to help constantly remind you of what matters most. You are it. And I'm your host, Brandon Beecham. I'm the reflection and extension of you who will be here each Wednesday interviewing a different consciousness changemaker. And on the other 4 weekdays, leading the way to ensure that your perspective is consistently expanded, your vibration is constantly elevated, and your heart is overflowing and full. And you guys have heard me say that if I ever run ads on this show, it will only be with a company that I fully support because I believe their intention is to make a positive difference in the world. Well, I'm pleased to announce that day has arrived and that this episode of the Positive Head Podcast is being brought to you thanks to the support of Gaia. If you're not familiar, Gaia is the go-to source for streaming consciousness content online. And you can sign up for your first month for only 99 cents at gaia.com/positivehead. That's spelled GAIA.com/positivehead. Check it out. All right, all you positive heads. On this week's Powwow episode, I'm very excited to have Jude Currivan here with me on the show. Jude is a cosmologist, futurist, planetary healer, and previously one of the most senior business women in the UK. She has a master's degree in physics from Oxford University, a doctorate in archaeology from the University of Reading, and has only written half a dozen books. I know what you're thinking. We really need to work on her resume, and that's why she's on the show today. We got to stop her from rusting on her laurels so darn much. Hey there, Jude. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Brandon. Thank you. It's lovely to be with you. Yeah, you're right. I must get out more.
Yes, we got to get you to work. I mean, this is just, all this sloughing off. Really, come on now.
Bad. It's us laid back Brits, you see. We don't know the meaning of work.
Exactly. That explains, I had my my whole family has done their ancestry in the last, I did it a few years ago, and the rest of my family just did it in the last few weeks. They've gotten their results. And I think I was like 52% Irish English, and my son was like, "Oh, I'm going to be, more mixed up than you are," because his mother is a little, we didn't know all of her background, and he ended up being really similar. I think he was disappointed that he was not more unique.
I think that's what kids and parents are like, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, I like to start. I'm pretty predictable with my starting question and my ending question. And the question I like to lead off with: you're in an elevator. The gentleman next to you looks over, says, "What's your passion?" You have 10 floors to answer. What do you say?
The nature of reality.
Yes, I like that. And you got 9 floors to go. That's what, as a descriptor of the show, I talk about very regularly saying, what we're doing here is exploring the ultimate nature of reality. And so I like that terminology a lot myself. So it makes a lot of sense that you ended up here. And why don't we start, Jude, with, if you could, give us a little bit of your background, your story, because it sounds like you've sort of walked both sides of the fence in many ways, and we'd love to kind of hear how you ended up where you're at.
Well, thank you, Brandon. You're right. It's been a dance. It's been a scenic route. And it's interesting. There was a Danish philosopher called Kierkegaard, Soren Kierkegaard, And he said we live life forwards and understand it backwards. And I think that's so true, because every step of my journey, I really hadn't a clue on the direction I was going. I was just showing up and enjoying myself and curious, and so kept on going. But what I realized looking back is that, every step, all those threads that you mentioned at the beginning and others, have interwoven into really a journey to understand as deeply as I can the nature of reality. And I'm still on that journey. But that's what's brought me to this point today. But I started back, you can tell by the accent, I'm English, but I grew up in the north of England. My father was a coal miner. He died when I was 10. My mum brought my younger brother, myself up as a single mom, as a widowed single mom. But right from the get-go, before Dad died, when I was 4 years old, I started to have what I'd call multidimensional experiences.
Wow.
Telepathic communications, precognition, remote viewing, and also clairaudience. Really started when I was 4 years old, and a discarnate light came into my room, and I started to hear the voice of
Wow.
that light, that being, that entity. And that really started me on a journey that has had me walking between worlds ever since. I'm 66 now. So I've been doing this for over 60 years, 6 decades of exploration. But alongside all of that, I got fascinated by both why and how reality is as it is. So obviously a lot of the perspective of reality is through sciences in various ways. So I started researching physics and astrophysics and quantum physics but all sorts of ways of trying to make sense of not just the physical world, but all the other worlds that I was exploring and experiencing directly. So those threads were going on from a very early age, and alongside them, again from a really early age, was a fascination with ancient wisdom, the way that our ancient ancestors had understood the world. And it seems there are a number of ways that they've done that, and there are a number of ways that we continue to do it. One is the way of, if you like, mental understanding, fitting the pieces together, and whether that was the ancient Indian sages that who had profound insights into reality, the ancient Egyptians, or the ancient Greek geometers who basically said, physical reality, God is a geometer. Everything is geometric and relational. And they had much at the deepest level of their wisdom. There was a commonality of their insights. So that fascinated me and continues to. And one of the things I love is that many of their insights are now being rediscovered and reappreciated by leading edge science. And the other way of learning and knowing is the shamanic way of, I call it the way of the heart. If the sage is the way of the head, then the shaman is the way of the heart, and that empathy and connectivity with all of creation and all of life. And the third way is the way of the seer or the mystic, or the unknowing knowing of that, complete breakthrough into a different expanded state of awareness. So my life's been an interweaving of all of those, and being in international business for 25 years along the way, and then more recently becoming an author of various books. So as I say, scenic route and onward journey.
Yeah, I love it, because I really relate to your path too, having been a serial entrepreneur my whole life, involved with, multiple businesses in the the default world, I suppose, if you will, and still with my hand in some of that, but in the process of, I have a thriving business, but in the process of sort of planning an ultimate exit so that I can put 100% of my effort into writing and a show that I'm producing, and this aside from this podcast. And and more energy into this type of work. And it seems like there's a lot of people, or maybe I just attract them because it's a similar path to my own, where it's like, sort of making that transition from, a more traditional trajectory, business life, if you will, to more and more work in this field.
Absolutely. And I know a lot of folks who are very much doing that. But I think also, I for many years, I also worked, part of what I did as a healer, and worked with people's psychological and emotional traumas. And I had so many folks coming and saying, I'm an accountant and I want to be a healer, or I'm a teacher and I want to be a healer, or I'm a lady who works in a supermarket, I want to be a healer. And my response often was, you can be a healer in all those areas of work. One of the greatest healer I ever knew was a car park attendant. And all he did when people rolled up in the morning, grumpy, or in the evening, having had a hard day at work, he would just radiate kindness and love. And that was just so healing. And he did that at the entrance and the exit of a car park. I know a lady who, when I was 14, I had a Saturday job. And she was a checkout lady at the local supermarket, and I was her packer. She was the same. People would come, they'd be downcast. She'd always have a cheery word for them. She'd always have a kind word. She'd see if they were struggling. She taught me so much, but she was a natural healer. And so I think I love this transition from the more traditional to whatever our passion calls us. But I also feel we can bring our inner growth to whatever we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think an important piece is, for some people, I know for me, it's definitely been not getting too resistant to the transitions too, in the process. If you're going through that, it's like impatience has never been my strongest virtue, I will admit. So, I think it can. Yeah, I'm sure I'm not. Well, okay, so we have an hour or so here together, Jude, and I'm already so fascinated by you and your world, and sort of trying to figure out the best way to get the most bang for our buck, so to speak, with your precious time and energy today. Maybe diving into some of the highlights. I mean, you have a bunch of amazing books. I haven't read them, but I have read about them, and all of them seem really, really fascinating. Maybe we should just sort of dive in to what you've written about, starting whether it be your most recent book, which is The Cosmic Hologram. Is that correct?
That is, yes.
Or if one of the others you think would be a better place to talk a little bit about, if you want to touch on each of them. But I figured that would be a really good way to spend our time. What is the wisdom that is distilled into some of your writing?
That I would be delighted to do that. And if you feel that that's the best way for us to go, maybe we could start with an earlier book called The 13th Step.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, sounds great.
One of the things when you're kind of inviting me onto your show was the power of synchronicities in your own life and how you're guided by them. And The 13th Step is a book I wrote back, more than 10 years ago now, but it was based on 13 journeys, 13 pilgrimages, sacred journeys I led around our beautiful planetary home from turn of the century, really, to 2006 or thereabout, 2006-07. And it began with what I didn't realize was a synchronicity, and I only realized had been a synchronicity at the end of those, multi-year journeys. So can I tell you a little bit about that?
Yes, that sounds wonderful.
Okay. Well, back in 1998, on the 3rd of May, I received a clairaudient message. And at the time, I was living in a beautiful, ancient, sacred landscape, which has sort of monuments, Neolithic monuments going back, up to 6,000 years ago. And an amazing place called Silbury Hill. And Silbury Hill is the largest man-made mound in Europe. And archaeologists reckon that it would have taken 2.5 million baskets of earth and turfs and stones to build it. And this is 4,500 years ago, right? And I had the joy of living about a mile away. And on the 3rd of May, 1998, I was given this clairaudient message, come to Silbury Hill tomorrow morning. So I went, oh, okay, right. So the following morning, which was May the 4th of May, 1998, I went to the hill and I just felt a real urge to climb it. And as I climbed and sat on top, I looked to the south and I saw an amazing crop circle in canola that had, which we call oilseed rape, but I think you call canola, which is bright yellow. And it was about 200 feet across. And I found out later that people had related it to what they call the Mayan wheel. And I looked down at this amazing formation that I found had only just come overnight. So it's very, very fresh. And I suddenly had this sense of connection with it, and something was really beginning to move inside me. It was almost as though I was getting answers to questions I'd never asked. It was like a huge download. Anyway, that really began, that moment began those journeys. And in the coming years, I was given further understanding of what was in store for humanity and for Gaia, our planetary home, in the coming years and in the run-up to 2012 and beyond, as a transition process and the possibility of a shift of consciousness. So being guided to go to originally 12 places, and then it became 13 places around the world to literally activate the planetary grid, readying for this time of possibility and conscious evolution. So that's what that's what you do, don't you? So numbers of people came with me, and we went to Egypt, South Africa, China, Alaska, Easter Island, South America, Australia, New Zealand. Ended up in Jerusalem, essentially. So 13 journeys that became the book, The 13th Step. And alongside those outer journeys was a very profound inner journey of awakening and transformation for myself and many of the folks who undertook those journeys with me. And that's a process that's ongoing. But it opened me up and us up to basically to expand our awareness beyond the ego, to go beyond the 7 chakras and our persona field of awareness into what's often called a transpersonal sense of self, and progressively to be able to communicate even more profoundly with other realms and Gaia as a living being, our planetary home as a living being, and also our whole universe as essentially a living, conscious entity and beyond. So that's a long story, but just to give you this idea of synchronicity. So alongside and just after the 13th step, I wrote a second book called The 8th Chakra, because for me, the 8th chakra, the higher heart, the universal heart, was a bridge between my sense of personal self and my sense of universal selfhood, which is within all of us. It's part of all of us. It's nothing special about it. And it feels that it's beginning to activate now as we go through this transition period. But the synchronicity was that all through those journeys, from that May morning in 1998 through to the end of those journeys in 2007 or thereabouts, the synchronicities just flowed, and they were guidance all along the way. And some of them I write about in the 13th step. But the one question I always had through all of those journeys was, why was it that May day in 1998 that began all of this? Because all the other points of activation were clearly, very astrologically significant, or they were very significant through their synchronicities. So I kept asking, never got an answer until way afterwards. And it was only a few years ago. And I asked again, I hadn't asked for some time, and I asked again, I said, why was the 4th of May so significant in this? And they said, I kid you not, I got the answer. Have you never heard of May the 4th be with you? I said, you're kidding. I said, you're kidding, aren't you? I went on these 9 years of journeys, began on this day, and That was the joke. That was the synchronicity.
You know what? Okay, I've got some synchronicity for you. So on the Positive Head Facebook page, I mean not Facebook page, Instagram page, I typically post, things that are uplifting and all that, but every now and then I'll decide to opt for a joke of some kind. And yesterday, the last two posts was strong people don't put others down, they lift them up. And then under it has Darth Vader holding someone up by the neck, and then under it says Darth Vader philanthropist.
I love it.
So I literally just posted a Star Wars meme as a last. Well, I posted that one, and then one right after it. We rise by lifting others, and then I said to go with the last post. So that's really funny that I can tie in a little bit to that story synchronistically.
I love it. And of course, A, it was a joke, and B, it was a cosmic joke, and C, it was absolutely accurate. The Force was with me. The Force was with us all the way through those journeys. And I think the Force acts in, whether we want to call it the Force, whatever we want to call it. I found very interesting the last Star Wars movie, where for the first time there was a very clear recognition that the Force is cosmic intelligence, is essentially love and interconnectedness. And that was with us all through those journeys and every step of the way, every day since.
Wow, that's pretty amazing, and I love the humor in it. I have a lot of synchronicity around my birthday that anyone who's been listening for a while has probably heard the story. And so for some time, that's something I've been very curious about as well. Like, why this date? Like, what is the significance? So I wonder if it will ultimately come out as a joke.
It probably will, but in a lovely, positive, supportive way. When is your birthday?
July 28th.
July 28th. Oh, my God.
July 28th. If I told you the old story, it'd take us 10 minutes of all, I was born on my dad's birthday, and his grandmother and her great-grandmother my great-grandmother died on that day, and it goes on and on and on. That's just like the tip of the iceberg with it. And it keeps unfolding. So,
yes. I'm wondering, when something like that happens, again, I take it as a synchronicity.
Yeah.
And that weirdness came through when you were talking about your birthday and your family line.
Right.
And what I was getting a sense of is that there's something about healing your family line that comes to you as being a catalyst for that in some way.
Interesting. Yeah, it not only extends to my personal family, Jude. I'll tell you real quick that just the rest of it, since we've started down the path. It's my dad's birthday. He was 28 and had me on July 28th. Also, his grandmother was born on July 28th. Her mother died on that day. An ex-business partner, good friend of mine of many years, very much a brotherly energy. He had who went on to become like a villain in my story, a betrayer, if you will. And he had a grandmother with July 28th as well as his baby mom. I met a very significant partner on my birthday who had a ex whose name was Anson, and all my relatives on my dad's side are from Anson. With that birthday are from a little town called Anson County in North Carolina. Well, her Anson committed suicide on July 28th. So there's even more. There's that's just it's expanded from there with meeting other people who have the same setup with the same name. Brandon and his dad having that birthday, and his name being Ryan, the guy who told me my brother's Ryan. Even a few weeks ago, I bunked with a guy named Ryan in Costa Rica, and he was July 28th. His brother's name is Brandon. And his name was Ryan, and my brother, it's on and on and on and on. So that's an interesting thing that has occurred to me as well, because there is so much familial stuff attached to it,
There is, and it seems to be about birth, deaths, and betrayals.
Yeah, apparently, huh? Yeah, that's very observative of you, for sure. That's true.
Yeah. I find that when these sort of things come up, as you know, with any synchronicities, and this is this is really attention, pay attention to this, I would suggest, is when we do, we're so helped in understanding and releasing whatever it may be that's causing this to present itself, because obviously it's been an ongoing thing. So the names, the resonances, the themes of birth, death, and betrayal suggest to me that there is some sort of trauma imprint that is perhaps offering a way of release and resolution through you essentially.
Yeah. Interesting. And then I had someone who looked it up one time, and there was in England, there was a survey done a few years ago to determine the most fortuitous best day to be born. And guess what it was? July 28th.
I can't imagine.
I don't know how they quantify such a thing, but it was really funny. Someone, after talking about this, they basically were on the show and were like, oh, I'm going to meditate on it and see what comes up. And then they said, well, I didn't get much other, but I found this, and it was like this survey, this study that had been done. So I thought that was really funny.
I love it. I love it.
There's some goodness there for sure. But let's move on. Let's talk a little bit more about. Okay, so you touched a little bit on the 13th step and the 8th chakra. What about your most recent book, The Cosmic Hologram?
Well, this is the book that I'd been waiting 60 years to write, because when I was going back to when I was 4 and beginning to have these multidimensional experiences, I experienced realities as essentially a cosmic hologram. A hologram reflects, each part of it reflects the whole, and it's nested within the whole. And in fact, the ancient Indian sages, the Vedic sages of ancient India, also described reality not in terms of a cosmic hologram, but essentially the same way. They described it as Indra's net. Indra was one of the gods of ancient India. And Indra's net, they describe reality as being comprised of a myriad of jewels. And each jewel has numerous facets, and each facet and each jewel is reflecting each and every other jewel in the cosmos, and all of the jewels are connected by golden threads of light, and they're in a sort of dynamic dance of being and becoming and existing and all of that. And it's such a beautiful image, and I was sort of, even before I knew of their writings, that was a way that I was beginning to experience realities as different levels that existed and had intelligence and entities and everything is an interconnected web, essentially, of life and consciousness and mind. And, our universe not as a great thing, but as a great thought in the mind of the cosmos.
Right.
So having experienced realities in this way all my life, a few years ago, I felt that it was time to really bring this not into the folks that get this, but the folks who perhaps don't get this, which is the majority, I suspect, at this point. And what I realized that from my scientific research across many fields of research is that the evidence was getting stronger and stronger and stronger that this is the real nature of reality, that the appearance of our universe, the energy and the matter and the space and the time of our universe emerges from a deeper non-physical foundation of information, relational, dynamic, not raw data, but meaningful information that literally informs the world.
Yeah.
So that's when I felt it was beginning to, I've been doing a massive amount of research and it was time to write the book. And so a year or so ago, it was published. And really its role is, or its aim, is not just to show the evidence that reality is unified, that mind, immaterial mind, doesn't somehow arise from material matter, but that mind and matter are unified, and that mind is the basic stuff of reality. It just expresses itself as energy and matter and space and time. So the book shows all the evidence for this across all scales, from the tiniest to the whole universe and many, many different fields of research. But it's more than that. Its aim really is not just to understand the unified nature of reality, but to experience and embody the unity awareness of unified reality, if that makes sense. So we realize that reality is real, but separation is not. Einstein talked about the illusion of separation. Many mystics and spiritual explorers through time have expressed not that reality isn't somehow not real, although some have said this, but for me, yes, it is real, but separation isn't. We are all profoundly interconnected with the whole universe,
Right.
the whole world, and the whole world emerges as a co-creativity of cosmic mind. So that's the book.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, it's such a powerful thing to realize that it is a projection in some way, and that you are the projected and projector, right? Simultaneously, in a sense. All right. Well, now seems like a good moment to take a quick minute to tell those of you who aren't familiar a bit about our sponsor, Gaia. I've been a big fan of Gaia for many years now, which is why they're the only content provider I've ever reached out to in regards to potentially supporting this podcast. So needless to say, I'm very excited they're now supporting the show. Gaia truly is my personal go-to source for streaming consciousness content on the web. They have an incredible 7,000 plus exclusive videos covering 5,000 years of wisdom. Just to give you an example, on the show Missing Links, the incredible researcher Greg Braden explores all the biggest questions concerning who we are, where we come from, where we're going, by connecting the missing links between science and spirituality to complete our understanding of humanity's history and to better understand the interconnectedness of all things. Awesome, right? And that's just one example. As you guys constantly hear me say, it's a daily conscious effort to maintain an elevated vibration. And if you're looking to go deep down the rabbit hole to do so, then Gaia is the best place I know of to do it, period. And you can sign up for your first month for only 99 cents at gaia.com/positivehead. That's spelled GAIA.com/positivehead. Check it out. And, one of the things that I often ponder in the fact that you have, a master's in physics from, such a mediocre school as Oxford.
I know.
Yeah, kidding. But so, I'm curious what your thoughts are digging into some of the science of this. You have the whole idea that it's all a projection. It's all a light show to a certain degree. And you also, when you look at, for example, like the double slit experiment, which I'm sure you're very familiar with, this idea of particles being in a state of quantum superposition until the observer is observing, and then, consciousness is present, and then it sort of like snaps into a particular location. On the cosmic scale, that's what we're observing, right? So does this lead you to the thought that the way I think of it is like, okay, if I play a video game, I'm walking down the hallway in a castle or whatever in the forest, and it's rendering as I turn the corner, right? It's really not there. It's in potentiality within the game, but it's not there. If I turn left, one thing renders, and if I turn right, another thing renders. Do you believe this is the way things are happening? Meaning, the fact that I'm in my studio right now and not in my bedroom, it's there in potentiality, but not there, in actuality until consciousness is present, in which case I turn the corner and go right and go up the stairs to my room, and then it renders.
I'd actually take it bigger than that, because I think there is for me, there is a misperception when we think of human consciousness as the only expression of consciousness. For me, our entire universe is a macrocosmic expression of consciousness, a finite thought form in the infinite and eternal mind of the cosmos that is a finite entity that began 13.8 billion years ago and is going through a universal cycle from simplicity to complexity, and it exists and evolves as a unified entity. So we are microcosmic co-creators of its intelligence. We have a meaning and a purpose for being here because we are co-creating the exploration and the experience and the evolutionary potential within our universe, perhaps of one of millions or billions of other species. Yes? So I would say it's not that when you go left, reality is there, but if you were to go right, left wouldn't exist and the right would be reality. It's more that our universe as a whole observes itself. So it's this thing about, if a tree falls in a forest and there's nobody there to witness it, does it really fall? Which is, a sort of an analogy to your
or does it make a sound, right?
Or does it make a sound? And what I would say is, yes, it does, because the universe as a whole is observing it. It doesn't need human consciousness to be there. And yet, when there is a human observation at a quantum scale, and in fact larger than a quantum scale, we're up to small diamonds being entangled. But nonetheless, we are microcosmic co-creators. So we're individuated, unique microcosmic co-creators. But together, we are a collective consciousness within a larger awareness that is our entire universe, within a larger awareness that is the entire cosmos. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I really like that perspective, and it's not one that I've considered, but makes a whole lot of sense as you share it. So that's great.
Because otherwise, I think what you get is, if you take this, the metaphor you gave, the analogy you gave earlier, to its logical conclusion, I don't exist until you have this call with me. Yeah,
right.
Your kids are in another room; they don't exist. So you open the door, and wow, there they are. And that I find very, very troubling. And all the evidence doesn't support that. All the scientific evidence. Not just in the cosmic hologram, but does support that our universe does exist and evolves. It's been doing it for 13.8 billion years. Now, talk about how it's evolved in that time in the most incredibly, exquisitely fine-tuned and wonderful way, to go from its most simplest to ever greater levels of complexity and self-awareness. And the way I describe it in the book, the increase in the informational content, which is the experience of the universe, is greater today than it was yesterday, will be greater tomorrow than it is today. And that itself is the flow of time. Every minute sort of time frame at the Planck scale is like another frame of our entire universe. Like the old films and the flickering of the frames. Yeah. It's like our universe has a frame flicker rate of, get this, 10 to the minus 44 seconds. So in a single second, our universe adds 10, which is 10 to the 44, which is 1 followed by 44 zeros, a frame flickers of evolution. And that's the flow of time is experience and evolution of our universe. And space has to expand. This is the holographic boundary of space, has to expand, so that rather like blowing up a balloon, ever more information can be experienced in the appearance of three-dimensional space.
Wow.
It's cool, isn't it?
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I've definitely heard less cool things, Jude.
That's a relief, Brandon. My whole life has not been completely wasted then.
So let's go a little deeper down this rabbit hole. So the way I feel and perceive realities to exist is, I am this node, this fractal of source consciousness that is experiencing its own, and to some degree, it's my own private universe, and everything in it is a reflection in some way, shape, or form of me. So you are actually an extension of my consciousness. I think we would agree that the separation is illusion, which you've already touched on. And in this moment, you're an extension of me that is reflecting me back to me in a certain way. And if the person who cuts me off on the ride to, in my car later, that's some part of me as well that reflects that part of my consciousness or something that's within me. And, so from the way I get it and the way I feel is like, it's all, we're all props in each other's movie in a certain sense. It's I'm the lead actor, director, star in my own private movie. Everything is a prop and a reflection in some way for me, and it's sort of like my own show in a sense. But vice versa as well. I'm a prop in your movie, and you're just another focal point of that source consciousness experiencing itself. What do you think about that concept?
I think it's a really helpful one in that regard, as far as it goes, because you're right. In that sense, we are each individuated and unique aspects of our collective consciousness. So the ancients described this as sparks of the great flame or droplets of the great ocean. So in that sense, and they were talking about the whole cosmos, but if we talk about humanity and human consciousness, yes, then that first person experience is exactly as you described. That first person experience seems to be on an inner level, but of course it also is on this interconnectivity level. So it's both me and we and all.
Yes.
And so I think this is where we're also, in terms of our conscious evolution, moving towards, is not from me to we, but me and we. And that's the hologram, where a hologram, every pixel of the hologram sort of reflects every other pixel. And yet it has its own uniqueness, and yet it is reflective of the whole. So if we have this sense of our collective human consciousness as this learning from, relating to, playing out, but then we expand what Einstein calls the circle of compassion to incorporate the whole of our planetary home, and realize that this is the web of life that is also reflective, and that, as an environment, entities are not separate from their environment. They're co-creative, co-evolutionary partners. So it's all of the, and then we just take that, we just breathe that out to the whole universe. And then we breathe it out beyond the physical realm, and we breathe it out to the sort of the fuzzy boundary of multidimensionality, where we have access to, the akasha, the memory of our universe on non-local levels, but also we have access to other multidimensional experiences and intelligences that are all existing and in some way evolving as part of what we call our universe.
Yeah, I'd love to, explore that a little further as well. I know, you stated earlier that you had a lot of multidimensional experience early on. So yeah, I'd just love to hear more about that, that part of your life, and what sort of things, as a futurist, like what do you see? Do you get, are you getting sort of glimpses into potential timelines? And, I just love, as someone who hasn't had a lot of that sort of experience, I'm always fascinated to hear accounts from people that do.
Well, yes. I mean, for me, having begun those sort of experiences so young, they become such an integral part of who I am and how I live my life. So every day, I'm open to synchronicities, I'm open to messages, whether it's a to-do list or whether it's don't go there, or deep insights. And when I was writing the books write me, essentially. That's the way I feel. And certainly the Cosmic Hologram, I felt I had wonderful guidance from, as Isaac Newton used to say, we can see so far because we stand on the shoulders of giants. And I felt very much that I was standing on the shoulders of giants when I was writing the book. And in terms of futurist, when you said that, I thought I'm an optimist rather than a futurist. My sense is that we are at a pinch point, we're at a pivot point, not just in human history, but, the whole where we are as a species and whether we can survive indeed and thrive as a species. And for me, our beliefs drive our behaviors. And I know that as a healer as well. And, when people believe something, that will be how they behave. And those beliefs can be very harmful or very, very positive and liberating. So it seems to me that on a collective level, our beliefs have sort of really moved into this sort of reductionist materialism, where, science up till now has said that the only world is the material world and that everything's separate. And, so for a lot of people, that's how they see themselves. That's how they perceive reality. And they behave accordingly. And we behave collectively accordingly. And those behaviors are often very dysfunctional. The way we treat each other through inequalities and lack of opportunities and lack of nurturing and exclusion and conflicts, and the way we treat our planetary home with pollution and exploitation.
Right.
And so basically, whilst, there are many initiatives afoot to try and help improve the situation, if those come from a perception of separation, trying to somehow get a bit closer together and get a bit rounded at the edges and a little kinder, then my sense is that's always going to be an aspiration, but very difficult to achieve. But if we can turn round and realise that our understanding of reality itself has been limited and essentially wrong, so that instead of coming from separation, we actually turn round and come from unity, expressed through diversity and differentiation. Suddenly, I hope that gives us the potential to transform our behaviors. So instead of being fearful of the separation of the other, we love because that person is our brother or our sister. Instead of feeling that other is to be feared and therefore treated through conflict, or for us to feel secure because we have more stuff than other people, we can actually realize that there is enough to go round, that we can share, that we can be inclusive in diversity rather than exclusive in separation. And so as a futurist, I think that the ways forward are either the unsustainability of where we've been and a breakdown and a dystopian future, or a realization of unity in diversity and unified reality and a leap forward into love, a breakthrough into a whole next chapter of conscious evolution. And that's where I feel is our choice, is our choice point. And so for me, coming to understand and experience and finally to embody as a dance of experience and a dance of exploration, unity awareness is the pivotal potential to transform a breakdown into a breakthrough.
Yeah, I agree. I always challenge people to, approach and challenge myself to approach everyone that I'm bumping up against, like we talked about earlier. Oh, this is, everywhere I go, I'm there waiting for myself. And how would I behave if that were the foundational, premise by which I interacted with each and every person that flows into my, that I bump up against in 3D, right?
I absolutely agree. And that person may look very different. They may behave very different. They may have their grumpy heads on. And there is a discernment. Yep. I mean, it's not about colluding with bad behavior, but it's, as you say, it's seeing with new eyes and seeing with new eyes that everyone is an aspect, a unique aspect, but an aspect of ourselves. And together we are this collective experience and collective opportunity to move forward together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And would you agree that there is, being someone who's had a lot of multidimensional experience and, glimpsed beyond the veil, so to speak, do you feel that there is that source plays out every potential So there is from this moment forward, because I think a lot of people feel really disempowered, like, oh, well, what can I do? And from my perspective, it's actually very empowering to know that you are, as we talked about earlier, sort of the center of your own private universe in a certain sense. And you have the ability to navigate timelines with your belief and with your energy. And that then sort of parlays into the idea of, okay, so if Source plays out all the potentials, there's versions of us that are pretty rocky roads from this moment forward, and there's versions that we do end up in this sort of more enlightened utopian sort of society, and you get to choose which one you navigate into individually in a certain sense, with your own vibrational offering. That's sort of my perspective on it. So I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Well, similar. I mean, I sort of look at the whole universe as a existing and evolving as a unified entity. So when I go back 13.8 billion years to the beginning of what we call space-time, the exquisite fine-tuning and amazing order was really our universe being born as a baby universe, as it were, as a universe soul. And since then has been evolving ever greater levels of complexity and self-awareness. About 5 billion years ago, our solar system and probably many, many others around that very, very broad time frame were able to come into existence with rocky planets such as ourselves, such as our own planetary home. And that enabled, the water and the sunlight, the warmth, and all the precursor to biology that was available by then because of this evolutionary trend complexity to start to bring forward biological life. And here we are, at this point in time. So it seems to me that our entire universe has an evolutionary impulse to ever greater levels of individuated self-awareness that is also collective and in co-evolutionary partnership with the universe as a whole. So it is us, yes, as individuated, as individuals, but as microcosmic co-creators within a universe that is itself has an evolutionary impulse of which we have an intrinsic role. We have a role to play. Are we going to play that role to go forward in our own conscious evolution, or are we just going to continue to play the illusion of separation and perhaps become extinct as a species, and also taking a lot of other species and exploitation of our beautiful planetary home with us?
Yeah.
Well, let's hope not. Let's act not, because I think it's more than hope. Because as you say, each and every one of us, I talk about acting local, feeling global, thinking cosmic. Let's figure that this is, unified reality. Great.
Like
now,
that.
What do we do about it in our lives? What choices do we make? And you say so fabulously, everybody you meet, treat them as an aspect of yourself. It's the golden rule. And if we do that, if we act local, if we answer our passion to be of service, to help, to get involved, to show up and get out of the way, and we do that within a feeling of our entire planetary home, of Gaia as a living being, which the indigenous peoples and the ancient peoples had such love and respect for us to regain that love and that respect and that empathy and that honouring. This really is such a fabulously wonderful place to explore what it means to be a conscious being and what it means to be human.
Absolutely. And I think you said it very well there. It's like, as Gandhi said, the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others, and to show up in that way. That is the thing that you can do, is to show up and say, how can I contribute to making, whether it's touching this one person's life or doing this very small thing, or, making a big impact. And I think a lot of times people, think about making a big impact. And I've got, I can never touch as many lives as Jude or Brandon or whoever it is they're thinking about at that moment. And the truth is, maybe that's not even the most important thing, not even necessary.
Absolutely.
Take Gandhi, for example. It's like, who is more important, Gandhi or, Gandhi's grandmother who nurtured him to give him the perspective of, who he became? Just to use that sort of thing as an example, you'd never know who you're touching and what that the ROI, the ripple of impact is.
Absolutely.
With that.
Absolutely, and it's what's called non-linear. In other words, a tiny seed can actually grow into the most amazing tree. And sometimes the sort of the biggest voices, don't actually have that enduring effect, and we don't know. That's the beauty of it, in a way.
Yeah.
And the other thing he said, of course, was be the change you want to see in the world. So it is exactly as you're saying. It's showing up, and whatever's calling you, be that change, and whatever it may be. And it may seem very small. It may be. It doesn't matter. It's being authentically who each of us is, and coming from the heart, and being in that service, and just being that change.
And what comes to mind too that I feel like wants to be expressed. I think of Gandhi, for example. He's someone who there was also rumors of them being, I can't even remember what his hang up was, whether it was he was bad to his wife or something, or I've been watching this. There's a new documentary on Osho, and who, to me was such a profound teacher. And then, but, there was all this controversy around them. I think a big piece of this is losing judgment, because, and for us not to throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, with some of these teachers and, and just people in our lives, whether they be Gandhi, Osho, or just the guy next door. They're a combination of all the things. They're here working out their own issues just like all of us. They may be really, really, really strong in this one way, really, really strong in what they can teach in this way. I always say we teach best what we most need to learn. And so if, it's just an important piece for a lot of people who are constantly, even listening to this broadcast, it's, picking this apart or judging this, or, and we probably have less of that than in most, and people who are tuning in are already pretty open to this sort of thing. But you know what I mean? I think that's a big piece of the puzzle, is don't throw the baby out with the bathwater with anyone that you're dealing with, and understanding that they're a human here working out their own stuff as well. And, they're going to be perfectly imperfect, and that is by design and part of it. And, I just, I felt called to point that out. Talking about Gandhi.
Well, and everybody. And I think that's really, really important. The only thing I'd add to that is I think there's a difference between judgment and discernment. And I think judgment is where we tend to, it's like we tend to project our own wherever we're at onto others often as judgments. But I think when somebody is coming from a place of wherever it is that doesn't feel right for us, doesn't feel resonant with us, then I think being discerning without being judging, I think is also important.
Absolutely.
There isn't a sort of a complete blandness of relative, everything's okay. It's more, no, that person who's hurting that child,
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. It's like, and it doesn't mean you need to wrap your arms around every single dysfunction that pops into your world, right? No, but seeing it from a perspective where you kind of understand that, even if you don't approve, it's them working out what they're doing. And of course, your aim in that interaction is to bring as much healing and positivity as you can to it, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Can I tell you a very funny story?
I love funny stories.
Well, I was in South Korea last November. And a couple of, I was a keynote speaker at a big conference, in fact, several big conferences, including a peace conference. And I also, a peace conference and others. And a couple of weeks before I went there, and my husband was with me, we found out that Donald Trump was going to be there at the same time, but the day before. So President Trump was going to be there on the Monday. We were due to be there on Tuesday. So, we thought, oh, okay, this is interesting timing. And then a few days before we went, we found out that actually he was going to be staying on and would be there on the day that we arrived. So we thought, oh, this is even more interesting timing. And then we arrived at Seoul, and we got to our hotel and realized that our hotel was the only hotel that directly overlooked, across the road, was the US military base, massive military base in the middle of Seoul. And 10 minutes after we got to our room, and we're on the 10th floor, we were just about taking our coats off, and we saw that the road that was directly underneath us and leading to the military base, they closed it to traffic. And suddenly this presidential entourage came down the road and went into the military base.
Oh, wow.
So we're standing there, in this exact sense of holding space and saying, whatever President Trump's here to do, may it somehow serve the cause of peace. And that was very much against what everybody was saying it would do and all the rest of it. But we just held the space that, in some way, whatever way, that the cause of peace could be served by this visit. And then a few days later, we were up at the demilitarized zone, which is the DMZ between South Korea and North Korea. And I spoke there about peace and grounding peace and peace coming. And it seemed so far away. And yet, yesterday and the day before, Kim Jong-un was with President Xi of China. The North Koreans and the South Koreans are starting to talk peace. They had a joint team at the Olympic Games, and President Trump has said that he will speak with North Korea. And North Korea has said it will denuclearize itself. So I don't know. All I know is that whatever comes, it's the cause of peace itself that's the important thing. But it's just but that's perhaps, again, coming back to what we said at the beginning, in paying attention to synchronicities and showing up and getting out.
I love that, and it really lends to my thought on, you in that moment making that decision, and sort of resonating with this idea of Trump and peace and in that region and all those things. So, is this you having stepped into a timeline where that actually manifested, right? Is there other timelines where that didn't manifest, but you literally have traversed into one? And I'm really happy to say, if that is the case, that I'm here with you.
I'm delighted you're here with me. Well, my sense is that our universe does exist and evolve as a unified entity. So within space-time of our universe, one timeline, there is a causality through the within space-time, but I'm sure there are many other timelines. So you don't think there could be? So are you saying you don't personally feel that there could be many versions of that same thing happening that you sort of waltz between? Well, one of the issues I have with vibrationally, one of the issues I have with the idea, if this is what you're saying, of so-called parallel universes, where there's slightly different versions of each of us, is that came up from trying to avoid consciousness within our universe. Some years back, Everett did his what he called many worlds interpretation of quantum physics. And the idea was that, our universe from that perspective is random. So the only way that our universe can be as finely tuned and as exquisitely balanced as it is with the laws of physics and the way it works and all the rest of it is if there are trillions on trillions of so-called parallel worlds, and ours is just a random universe. And the reason that came about was that they didn't want to include the nature of consciousness. And so when people talk about different timelines, if you take that to its logical conclusion, it means every quantum choice at the level of quantum choices is a different universe. It's not just versions of you and me, it's versions of going down to that scale. And for me, there's something called Occam's razor, which is that the world is as simple as it can be, but no simpler, which also Einstein said. And for me, that doesn't pass the Occam's razor test. And it doesn't pass the laws of physics test either. But what but by perceiving our universe and everything in it as part of a unified reality of consciousness, of mind, then you don't need parallel worlds, but you can still have alternate experiences and multidimensional experiences. It just means that there's not a trillion versions of you and I and, out there somewhere doing slightly different things at slightly different points, because that's not what the many world interpretation actually comes down to. It comes down to not just trillions of you and me, it comes down to trillions on everybody in the world, and not just everybody, every bird, every fish, every ant, everything down to quantum scale. And why? And the reason is it was set up as because it didn't want to incorporate consciousness.
Oh, and to me, I hear what you're saying, and it's like, okay, so someone maybe put that forward with a sort of a motive, right? To me, I don't get that motive from the concept personally. It's like when you say why, it's like, well, because Source is infinite and it experiences all possibilities, and that is well beyond what our mind can even begin to hold when you think of being that vast. It's like, I think of, psychic phenomenon. My first experience with that, sitting down, I believe it's someone tapping into the potential me's, right? And this person said, I see you in a cold place working in Chicago in business. I was planning to move to Chicago and work in business at that time. This was in Atlanta, Georgia, when I was getting this reading. And then she goes, oh, there's a whole other path in California in music, though. I believe both of those exist and have played out in eternity, and so, the fact that someone sort of...
It may well be.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
It may well be. It may well be. What I'm really saying, though, is within the space-time of our universe. So you decided that you would do what you do, and you're living that life out in this universe, in this finite thought form that is a finite thought form in the infinity of the cosmos. So, yes, another universe, another, whatever may exist where you decided to go to California, or a version of you, or a possibility of you, or a different being that maybe wasn't human but is another creature.
Right.
All I'm really saying is if we skinny it down to our universe and the space-time of within our universe, then there is you, and there is me, and there is us, and there is all.
Right. Well, I am glad to be in this universe with you, Jude. This has been absolutely fascinating to pick your brain and to postulate and ponder the ultimate nature of reality with you. You are such a delight. What is the best way for people to connect, who want to follow your work, or where can they get your book, that sort of thing?
Oh, that's really kind, Brendan. Well, first of all, Amazon has all of my books, and they're both hard copy and Kindle. And then I have a website called Jude Currivan, my name, JUDCurrivan.com. And people can go there to get some more background and what I'm doing and future events and interviews and such as this wonderful one. And also they can sign up to my free newsletter that I send out from time to time, again, to update my sense of what's going on and how we can help.
Wonderful. I do have one last question I would like to leave you with. In the spirit of being predictable. My final question, Jude, what is the meaning of life according to Jude Currivan?
To find and experience the reality of love.
I would agree with that one for sure. And Jude, you are very lovely, quite lovely yourself. Thank you so much for taking the time to connect with me today. This has been such a pleasure.
Thank you, Brandon, and thanks to everybody who's listening to us. It's been a real joy for me too. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Until next time, journey well.
Thank you. Bye for now.
Well, everyone, that concludes this week's interview episode. If you have enjoyed this positive download from our hearts and minds to yours, please take a minute, give us a rating or review on iTunes, since iTunes is the holy grail of all things podcasting. Your good reviews help us to reach more listeners. Also, We would be extremely appreciative if you would tell your friends and family about the show. Our sincere intent with the Positive Head podcast is to spread positivity to the world because we're selfish, quite honestly. I say that jokingly, but really only halfway joking. I'm referring to the good kind of selfish based on the knowing that we all get what we give in this life, because when we give, we're actually always giving to extensions of self, since we're all really one in the same consciousness, just in different bodies. So if you want to be a good selfish along with us by helping to spread the positivity, by all means, please proceed to shout about the Positive Head podcast from your rooftop. Otherwise, as you continue on your fabulous journey in this 3D reality, be sure to remember this. As long as you ain't dead, you're already positive ahead. Journey well, everyone, and thank you for being.